Phil Kearny historic site in Wyoming on the Bozeman Trail. Very significant in the Plains Indian Wars, particularly with the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Not going to go through a whole history here today. We're just going to take some movies of it. Let's get a little feel of this place. Not a documentary. Well, this is a huge place. I knew it was a huge fort. They've only built a little bit of the stockade back, and the visitor center, well, there is none. It's being built right behind me right now. So we're gonna stroll around this fort a bit. There are tablets everywhere, so we're not gonna film every one of them. But we also would like to get to the Fetterman Fight and the Wagon Box Fight. So that's our plan. The fort, Fetterman, and Wagon Box. So I'm gonna stroll around, take a few pictures of things as we go. And here, just inside the stockade, we see a little sentry post platform, so you could see over the top just a bit. And here we have it from inside the sentry post, Fort Phil Kearny. The Bozeman Trail will be running just to our right here. And the beautiful foothills here of the Bighorn Mountains. And beyond, you might see some of the white-topped peaks. Bighorn Mountains. Peaks up around 10,000. I know one of them is 13. So very high mountains to the west. This fort was very large, 800 feet by 600 feet, so that's a couple of football fields out here, quite a few. So we're going to walk a little bit along some of the perimeter. Don't know how much we'll do. Piney Creek is to the left there with those trees. I know part of the fort jutted out so that the animals could water at the creek. I think straight in front of us here. So let's take a walk around the fort. See what we can come up with. So just inside the entrance gate we find these metal posts. These posts indicate corners of buildings. There are quite a few of them here. You might see that blue sign in the center there that indicates the officers' quarters. So they're right inside the stockade here. This is what's called Officers' Row. According to this sign, they were the last set of shelters to be built at the fort. Okay, so we're going to go clockwise as the directions say. So we're going to head this way toward the east, and we'll take a stroll. Oh, here's infantry barracks. Okay, so these blue signs here, this would be the infantry. I think Commander Carrington had 4 companies, I think, of the 18th Infantry. So these would be the infantry quarters right here on our left, this mowed out area. And you can see the posts for the buildings. All right, so we're starting to get our orientation here. It's too bad there's no visitor center. I don't see any interpretive guides, no directions how to get to the other points. The Wagon Box Fight and Fetterman, but we'll figure it out. So we're strolling along the officers' quarters here. I'm sorry, the infantry quarters. This is really pretty remarkable and interesting. Right here, this is the bakery. We are in, I think, the northeast corner of the fort. I have the corners marked by small stockades. So this appears to be, as this blue sign indicates, the bakery. Now I'm going to stand near this corner and turn around And look at the size of this place. Let's turn and take a look. We are at the northeast corner of the fort, and it just extends way out here. You might see the southeast corner. What a huge place. And there were shelters built outside the fort also. The band, their quarters are right in front of us here next to the bakery. Very handy spot for the band to be. All right, and as I turn here, you'll see the entrance to the fort out here. So look at the size of this place. Wow. Right now I'm walking along the eastern face of the fort, passing the band's quarters right behind me here. And you'll see all these metal posts, lots of buildings. I think the hospital might have been right behind us also. This is the Sutler store right here. Turn it around. Here is the Sutler store. So the perimeter appears to be all the buildings. What do we have here? Fort headquarters. Okay. The post headquarters right here. Wow. So not too far from the bakery either. Okay, I guess this might be a monument to the headquarters. Let's see. My first and probably only visit here. All right, so this is an earlier marker that was put here. All right. And just next to the post headquarters is the guardhouse. And as I said, Carrington, the commander, when he arrived, he had several prisoners on hand right at the get-go. All right, so we're going to continue on. Can read about all this history. That's a gun bastion there. I think when Carrington first arrived in 1866, he had 4 cannon with him. So that must have been one of the points. And out here beyond this fence, let's take a look at this yellow sign. Civilian mess. Okay, so there's many civilians here working as teamsters and other things, but this is the mess hall for the civilians. All right, and you see this extends way down to the creek. Somewhere down there is where the animals could water. You see some cows right now out there in the field. Again, that's Pilot Hill right in the center of the picture there. So now we're going to continue. We're going to head a little bit on down the western wall. I'm not sure if they have this corner marked. And here we have the Fort Cemetery. I believe that cemetery is outside the walls, and the bodies from the Fetterman massacre and other casualties here were buried there, but moved, most of them, to the cemetery, I think at the little Bighorn site. Okay, there is the cemetery in the center of the center of the picture, the white fence. You can see that out in that area is where the cemetery was. And so those bodies were removed to Custer National Battlefield over in Montana, not very far from here. Maybe to give you a sense of the size, if I look to the right, there's the entrance stockade. And beyond that, I'm not sure yet because we're going to yet to discover it. That ridge in the back, that I think is Lodge Pole Ridge, and I think that's the ridge where Fetterman pursued Indians that were really baiting them into an ambush. So there are some silhouetted figures on horses up there, and so I suspect that's Lodgepole Ridge. That's the ridge he would have ridden over. We'll be heading over to the Fetterman battlefield site in a little bit. We have the quartermaster office here we're walking by for supplies. So looks like you're getting the full tour here of the fort, at least the location of things. We move on. So I have a correction here. Those figures on the horses on that ridge, that is Sullivan Ridge. And that's the ridge that was the route down to Piney Creek for the logging. The Lodgepole Ridge, where Fetterman charged, is out here. One of these ridges to the right here. Not sure which one. Will be in that direction in a little bit. So Sullivan Ridge to the left, Lodgepole Ridge to the right. What we're looking at here, that pointy hill with, you may see a little flag flying on there. That is Pilot Hill. That's where the fort's picket post would be. And had a good view of the surrounding area from up there. So if you read about this fort, you'll hear Pilot Hill mentioned quite often. And here is the sawmill shop, or the sawmill, right by the southwestern corner of the fort. It's hard to imagine how much wood was needed to build this stockade, 600 feet by 800 feet. Each post was 11 feet, 3 feet in the ground, and 8 feet above ground. Not to mention all the buildings in this fort. So there were, here's the NCO quarters. There were work parties constantly going down to Piney Creek, which wrapped around to the west here, and bringing in the lumber that was needed on the wagons. And at one point, I mean, this is several years in the making of this fort to complete it. At some point, they made down by Piney Creek, a circle of wagon boxes as a protection against raids. So we're going to be heading over there. That was in 1867, the Wagon Box Fight. So that was sometime after the Fetterman Fight. That was December 1866. Okay, so here we have the magazine, all the ammunition, pretty much in the center of the fort. I've read a little bit about this. Not an expert by any means, but there is an account that should the garrison be overrun, I think Carrington was heading out with some of the troops. This is horrible, but the women and children, instead of succumbing to the attacks of the Cheyenne and Sioux and Arapaho, the remaining men here were told, if it was overrun, place the women and children into the magazine and light it up. That was brutal. Luckily, fortunately, that didn't have to happen. All right, here's the post commander's quarters. An attempt at socializing. Carrington's wife, Margaret, on the left there. And it was Colonel Carrington, I believe. He had 2 children, 2 sons. There's the officers' quarters right there. And we have made the full walk through the perimeter of the fort. So now we're going to head off to the battle sites, see what we can find in that area. And essentially in the center of the fort, here is the flagpole site. And here is Colonel Carrington, who returned to the fort site in 1908 to dedicate this monument. Pretty awesome. After Red Cloud, chief of the Sioux, won this war in 1868, this fort was burned to the ground by the Native Americans. And so we have a few little signs of the perimeter and the archaeological finding of the building. So here is the site of the entire map of the entire fort. We toured this inside area here. Out here would be the civilian area. Piney Creek at the bottom. Well, a neat visit here. So let's head over to the other sites. And one more thing before we leave, here at the northwest corner of the stockade, we have the surgeon quarters. And sadly, it looks like the chapel was not far away. But there was a chapel on the site. And let's head up into this area. Here's a view from the end of the stockade as far as they've built. Get a sense of the size of these logs. About 8 feet tall, out of the ground. Let's walk along the edge here just a little bit. Maybe get a little sense of this. Here's some openings in the wall here. All right, so we'll continue on. Another gun bastion in this corner. Pretty awesome. So we'll get up here, we'll take one more look back into the interior of the fort, and then we will move on. Here's where we came in. Our entrance, which actually is near the northwest part of the fort. And I'll look back, the post and rail fence, that would be the perimeter. Stockade would have run along there throughout our little tour here of the fort. Okay, we're going to head out. This is a monument just a few hundred yards from the fort. This monument is in honor of John Portugee Phillips, who rode for 4 days and nights, mostly at night. Freezing temperature in December of 1866, 236 miles to Fort Laramie to request help after Fetterman's command was destroyed. What a remarkable feat. Remarkable man. And this is the ground where Fetterman led his men, falling for the bait of the Sioux Indian. And I think about 81 soldiers and civilians were killed right here in this area by Sioux under Chief Red Cloud in 1866, December 21st. So we're gonna try to walk out to that knoll out there in the distance. We'll take that little walk and see what we can learn. This is about 3 miles, I think, from the fort itself. So we are right here, and we're going to walk this little trail out to this point and around. We get to here, we'll take a look and just take a look down the ridge there. This is called, as you see, Massacre Hill. All right, so let's walk this trail. Yeah, I believe there were mounted infantry up front, and then the cavalry under Grummond followed Fetterman. And I believe the battle was down the slope way up ahead, and then they retreated back up to these hills here. But no one survived that fight on the soldiers' side. So as we approach the summit of this hill, I would just suggest purchasing a very good book on the Fetterman Fight. Read about it. That would be better than myself going through details. I'm not an expert on this by any means. But as always, it's always best to get out into the field where these things happen. Much different than reading it in a book. Beautiful view to our left here of the Bighorn Mountains. This just feels so reminiscent, or there are parallels, it seems to me, of the Custer fight. You know, seeking the high ground. So what do we have here? Yeah, there were no survivors, so try to piece this all together. There were many survivors, of course, on the Indian side, and there are accounts that they give of this. And from the Native American point of view, this battle is called, if I remember right, the 100 in the Hand, from a vision that I believe one of the Native American sages had before the battle. So that gave them confidence to go ahead with their plan. And from their point of view, it was a great success. Well, if I read that tablet right that I just passed, this depression right here in front of us is part of the original Bozeman Trail. Most of it, they say, has been eroded away. There's a view to the east. That's I-90 right there. So from what I'm gathering is this, again with a little similarity to the Custer fight, is a running battle, as the soldiers were very aggressive pursuing the decoys, and then once they realized that they were in for a little bit more than they expected, it seems like they fell back along this ridge, firing, falling back, until finally overwhelmed, I think in 2 different groups. And we're getting pretty darn close to these cows, so let's keep an eye on them. They left us a little present here. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. All right. As the command retreats up the hill to this point, stopping only once or twice to fire at the pursuing warriors. Okay, so a little further north, maybe on that other hill, the civilians, I think they had repeating rifles, and others are trying to form some sort of skirmish line. Infantry are to our back. The number of warriors is overwhelming. Alright, so there's an attempt for the soldiers to group together, but looks like they didn't quite make that. Here we have a plaque describing the fate of Big Nose, Cheyenne warrior. He was hit in this area, and 2 warriors placed him in this depression, believed right here, during the fight. And he did in fact die of his wounds. But he asked that his head be placed up the hill where he can breathe fresh air before he died. So right here is the end of the interpretive part of the trail. We're heading back down the ridge. And I'm here, it's June 16th, and we have these beautiful wildflowers and green grass and so much life in the area. It's hard to imagine December 21st, 1866. Much different landscape at that time. And so that's the end of my little amateur tour here. Please grab a book, read it. Maybe you can take a few peeks at this and see the land, or get out here yourself would be wonderful. Out here in Wyoming, just south of Sheridan. Okay, we're gonna go take a look at the Wagon Box Fight. This is the site of the Wagon Box Fight, as the sign says, in August 1867, so about 9 months after the Fetterman Fight. And Red Cloud's warriors attacked the soldiers and the woodcutters here that were cutting all that wood for the fort. And so they had a little corral of these wagon boxes for supplies and animals, and they went in there, and with their superior weapons were able to hold off the Indian attack until help arrived. And so the Indians retreated at that point, as the reinforcements had some cannon with them. So we're going to head over to the memorial to our right here. And here we have a monument erected right here on the site of the Wagon Box Fight, August 2nd, 1867. This monument was erected in 1936. You see the wagon box right there in the background, rather small. I think there were 14 of them that made this little corral. And it was right here in this little perimeter that these soldiers repelled repeated charges by the Sioux under Red Cloud. Finally, as I said, when the reinforcements arrived, the Indians pulled back. About 1 year later or so, this war was over, and Red Cloud had won his war. Powder River country remained, for a time, land of the Sioux and Cheyenne and Arapaho. All right, that's going to conclude our tour here, very short, of the Wagon Box site. I think we have one more spot we're going to take a look at over there in the background, and then we'll close this. And the final monument on this site, erected by the state of Wyoming. So quiet and peaceful whenever one visits these sites. Nothing like it was at the time. But it's good that we protect these for the Native Americans and for all Americans to come and learn about our history. This is sunset at Lake de Summit, just south of Sheridan, Wyoming. And there's not a sound.